Hi everyone, welcome to our next interview in our series with our Coopers. My name's Hamish Black, and tonight I'm excited to be joined by James Molnar from Trust Hungary. G'day James, how are you doing?
Very well, Hamish. How you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. Certainly COVID has changed our world, but at least we can still connect, so it's a good thing.
Yes, it is.
James, we'll go straight into the interview. Recently, we rebranded Demtos Hungary to the new name Trust in the Australian market. It'd be great if you could give me and give the customers an overview of the actual Trust brand itself.
Absolutely. After the fall of communism in Hungary, my family came back here to reinvigorate the once well-respected and well-known Hungarian oak barrel market. And Trust was the company that we founded here in 1992, starting just simply with 4 people for the purpose of making staves for wine barrels. The staves were very well regarded by wineries in the United States that bought a little bit of wood directly, and some French coopers. So that company grew almost exponentially to about 60 people by 1997, supplying about 30,000 barrels worth of staves. We kept pursuing that market, but at some point we thought that that market would not last forever, so we laid the groundwork to build Trust Cooperage in 1998, which came online in 1999. The first barrels left here for the Southern Hemisphere, actually, that year under the Trust name. In Australia, we used Demtos Hungary because in the year 2000, we formed a partnership with the Francois family of cooperages, and the distribution channel, Classic in Australia, had the Demtos portfolio. So at the time, we made the decision to plug it in as Demtos Hungary. However, those barrels have always been made at the Trust Cooperage here in Hungary.
I noticed, was it 2 years ago you celebrated 25 years?
That's right. We had our 25th anniversary, 3 years ago now in 2017. And I'm pleased to say that since we started the cooperage, we've produced well over 300,000 barrels as well that we've shipped around the world to 40 different countries. We still operate the stave mill, of course, here in Hungary. And of course, the products have expanded to include oak alternatives under our Quercus brand and a complete range of wine.
So James, thanks for that explanation on the actual Trust brand. It'd be really interesting if you could describe some of the history around Hungarian use actually around the world.
Hungarian oak has actually been used going back historically. Hungary's quite an interesting place for oak, and it has been because of Hungary's central location, kind of in the heart of Central Eastern Europe. Forest management in Hungary goes back over 500 years. Barrel use in Europe goes back to Roman times. Hungarian oak probably had its heyday in the 1800s when there was a shortage of oak in Western Europe, predominantly in France, and French cognac makers, winemakers turned to an alternative supply, and that alternative supply came from the Carpathian Basin, primarily in what is known today as Hungary. So Hungarian oak had a pretty wide run in Western Europe from about the mid-1800s to roughly World War I, when obviously things changed. So in Europe, Hungarian oak is a fairly known quantity. In the rest of the world, Hungarian oak trickled out, but not is widely because of communism and, of course, the lack of modern infrastructure in the 1800s to get the products beyond the continent of Europe. But it has been there in Europe and in the background for a very long time. And today, I'm very happy to say that it's used far and wide in 40 different countries. So we're quite proud of that. And it's not just wine. It's used for beer. It's used for spirits. It's used as broadly as a barrel can be. So.
And James, you talk about the supply chain. We're particularly interested in the actual forest itself and the comparison to the French. How do you see, or do you see a difference? Because we talk about Quercus petrea, Quercus robur. Do you see similarities between the French forest and the Hungarian forest?
Well, they're pretty much identical. The only difference is a little bit in terms of how they're managed. In France, of course, they use an auction system to sell the logs. Auction systems are fairly limited and rare here in Hungary. And in France, they have, of course, much more forest because France is a much larger geographic place than Hungary is. But in terms of Quercus petraea and robur, those are the species that are found in Europe. The Hungarian trees are exactly the same as the French trees. And if you look at things as we do in our lab, you won't see very much difference, if any, between France generically and Hungary generically. Now, if we went forest by forest through Hungary and forest by forest through France, of course, we could find some gentle chemical markers and lab analysis that might point to a difference. But by and large, on average, the wood is exactly the same. The growing conditions in Hungary, the forest conditions, the forest management practices are all very similar to those found in France and the rest of us.
Oh, fantastic. James, we're talking about cut at the moment. Obviously, it's front of house. How is the actual Trust Cooperage coping with the situation, COVID?
Well, it's like everyone in the world. It's been a bit day to day as the landscape shifts, but we've looked to COVID as a bit of an opportunity. We've had a reasonable run. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to sit here and say this was a great year, but it's been okay.
Yeah.
And we're happy that it's been okay. But at the same time, we're going to have a little bit of extra time in the year, which has given us an opportunity to do two things proactively. Number one, we've broadened our R&D focus in terms of some of the new products we want to look at, placing some of the prototype barrels, and doing a range of work on that end. And on the other end, it's a great opportunity for us to tear apart some equipment and go offline for 2-3 weeks for some of the major rehab work that we just never had the 2-3 weeks to do. So come this winter here in Europe, we're looking to do a little bit of updating of some of our older equipment and get ready for hopefully what will be better days in 2021 and 2022.
Fantastic. James, my final question for you is, when we talk about winemaking trends, what are you seeing? And as Trust, you touched on it then with your research centre. I know you've developed some new exciting products at Trust. Could you sort of give us some insight on what those developments are and maybe highlight one specific barrel?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it bears mentioning now that you brought it up that we are different as a cooperage in that we have our own fully functional wine lab staffed by 4 employees, and we're doing north of 10,000 unique measurements for wineries in Eastern Europe. We have the latest equipment, gas chromatographs to everything you need for winery measurements. So that gives us pretty much an unparalleled access to a place where we can test our theories scientifically on oak. And we've been doing that through our own lab, but also in partnership with universities, for example, the University of Verona in Italy. And our view has shifted a little bit. While we are talking a little bit about Hungarian oak and what it can do, I think that oak has historically been viewed through a prism that limits us to, relatively speaking, 3 flavors: French, Hungarian, and American oak. And that's okay, because that's the prism through which we understand oak. But here at Trust, we also think that it's the job of a cooper to look beyond these sort of quaint or maybe parochial notions of country of origin and maybe look at the product for what it can do. And to that end, we've been seeing if we can provide customers with outcome-driven barrels based solely on the chemical makeup of the oak inside and the coopering practices applied to such. One such example would be our new, or fairly new, 5-star barrel. 5-star barrel, by its name, doesn't say much other than it would be high quality, but the name does reflect what's inside. We engaged in a research project with the University of Verona where we analyzed approximately 60 different oak origins from all over the world. That would be forest by forest. And we provided the samples from no toast all the way up to heavy toast, so 5 different toast levels. And we analyzed 2 things relevant to winemaking: retained tannins and retained oxygen. Based upon the results of that study, we were able to identify 5 forest origins for their unique traits. So we wanted to craft a barrel that was fast integrating and very fruit forward and very sweet. And that was the 5-star barrel. And the way we achieved that is we took these 5 forests, we put them in one barrel, but with 5 different toast levels. So when you say 5-star, it's 5 toast levels, 5 forest origins in one barrel, and the net result is very fast integration and a very sweet, fruit-forward barrel, but with lots of layers and richness and lushness. And the reason for that is the balance of tannin and retained micro-oxygen that's in the wood. So when you fill the barrel, you're getting the benefits as you would from using a MOX process and maybe some added tannin at some point in the winemaking process, except here you're getting it from the barrel itself because nature provided it to us in the staves that are in that barrel.
It certainly is an exciting barrel, James, and we're lucky enough to be trialling a few of this from 2020 vintage. Unfortunately, it's a little bit early to make judgment yet, but so far it's looking very positive and we're very excited. But James, look, thanks again for your time tonight, giving an insight into the Trust brand, a little bit of insight into Hungary as well. We appreciate that. We're hoping we'll see you down under in the near future. And again, thanks for your time, James.
You bet, Hamish.